Welcome to Expert Opinion, the branding business forum where leaders share their views, insights, and experiences from the world of B2B branding. And now, here's your host.
Our guest today is Wendy Newman, who is Senior Vice President of Corporate Marketing at AMN Healthcare. Welcome to the show, Wendy.
Thank you, Alan. Pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you for joining us. So AMN Healthcare is the leading healthcare workforce solutions and staffing services company in the nation. First question, Wendy, what does AMN Healthcare actually do?
Well, we provide hospitals and healthcare facilities with unique solutions to workforce challenges so they can focus on quality patient care. We have staffing services which handle sort of the critical immediate staffing needs where we place permanent, temporary physicians, nurses, and allied professionals in healthcare facilities throughout the country. And then we handle the recruitment and the screening, and we offer continuing education to our nurses. But we also offer workforce solutions that help our clients with their long-range, more complex staffing issues. So today our clients, they need a partner that understands more about how to reduce cost and increase efficiencies. And labor costs are about half of the cost for healthcare systems right now, so we play a critical role in helping with their labor issues.
Interesting. And the AMN in your name goes right back to your origins as American Mobile Nursing.
Absolutely.
And so you've come a long way since then. How long have you has the company been in business, Wendy?
So we've been in business well over 25 years, and we started off, as you just said, as American Mobile Nurses in the travel nursing space. And we were just one single business line. And we've evolved over the years through multiple acquisitions and organic growth to the leading healthcare staffing company and workforce innovator.
Interesting background. So what's happening in healthcare? We know everybody knows that the Affordable Care Act is now a fact. But what is happening to make AMN such an important company to customers? What do they look to you for?
Well, as you mentioned, healthcare is undergoing an unparalleled transformation. And there's a lot of forces that actually are kind of converging. One, which is the shortage of healthcare professionals in all clinical areas. By the year 2020, there's going to be a shortage of about 90,000 physicians. And at the same time, there's 30 million more newly insured Americans who will have paid access to health care. And then in addition to that, the equation of the aging baby boomer population. So there's 10 million more people age 65 and over who will need more care. So there's this rising demand of quality improvement and cost reduction, changes in healthcare funding. It's all converging into this perfect storm for healthcare. But the one common denominator is the healthcare workforce. So we're really in a position right now to be helping our clients and client facilities and so they can provide that quality care and coming up with this answer of innovation and workforce solutions, which is something that we've been working on in our positioning for quite some time.
Our clients, do they realize, Wendy, the range of services that you offer and the impact that you can have on their business?
That's part of what we've been trying to accomplish through both our brand strategy and positioning as an organization. We really are the first healthcare workforce solutions company that has gone out and positioned ourselves in this way, and mainly because it is what our clients are looking for. They're looking for a strategic partner who can assist them with all these workforce challenges. As I said, it's more than just providing a nurse or a physician into a hospital. They've got a myriad of issues with their workforce that they need a strategic partner to help them with.
Right. So a perfect storm, and AMN is the pioneer. So part of your responsibility at AMN has been to develop the AMN Healthcare brand, Wendy. At what point did the team and you realize that it had a branding problem? What were the business issues you were dealing with at the time?
We had several. You mentioned early on that we started off as this small travel nursing company, American Mobile Nurses. But since the late 1990s, we've had 12 key strategic acquisitions. We went out to the marketplace as single brands, one brand, particular space, but we also had a multi-brand recruitment strategy. It seemed to work back then, but it wasn't working as we were moving forward and acquiring all of these other brands. That was a key challenge for us. And the other challenge was, as we did this, many of these brands were going direct to our client under those brand names. There was very little brand awareness for AMN Healthcare and some confusion out there as we went through acquisitions of who we really were as an organization. And that's when we realized we needed to figure out this brand issue.
Companies do get complicated as they grow, and it sounds like there was confusion in the marketplace as to who AMN was and is and the role you could play. So branding became the central kind of driver at your communication strategy. Absolutely,
and I think the big difficulty that we had was we were challenged with how to articulate who our brand really was. And we had myriad of acquisitions at the time, and we had to really figure this out. We were very strong in our business strategy. We knew where we wanted to take the business, but we couldn't figure out how to put all of these brands together and to create this vision for AMN Healthcare, which is our corporate brand, something that we needed to maintain our focus on. It's one of those things where sometimes you say, well, what do we want to be when we grow up? And we knew what we wanted to be as a business, but we surely did not know how to articulate this and how to put all of our businesses together.
Interesting. So all these issues converging, acquisitions, integration, lack of awareness, so branding became central to your job at the time. So how did you begin, Wendy? I mean, a lot of our clients or people who are considering branding are vaguely aware of all these issues, but they really don't know how to begin to think about branding. How did you go about it?
Well, I think the thing that was most important to us was, first and foremost, is that we needed to go out and find a strategic partner who we could work with to help us identify all of those aspects of our brand strategy. What was it that we really needed to do in our priority in defining our brand strategy? So that was first and foremost. That was a key priority for us. And so we embarked on an extensive research project. It took us about a year and a half with all of our key stakeholders, our internal customers, our external customers, our investors, our board. And then we worked on developing out, after we gathered all of these insights, developing out our brand architecture. That took quite some time, over the course of how many years that we acquired all these brands, and then looked at the capabilities that we had within brands and which brands do we want to maintain and which ones do we need to sort of rationalize out within our portfolio. And then we also needed some assistance in developing a sort of future brand acquisition and transition strategy for any of the new acquisitions we're going to have or launch internally. And then after that, created a name convention, brand decision tools. But it was really the focus on the brand strategy piece of it, which we needed. And I think what companies may tend to do is to spend too much time internally trying to figure this out without getting some assistance. And again, working with an outside team like BrandingBusiness to help them through this process.
One thing we hear over and over again when companies acquire businesses is that there's a tendency for the acquired business to be loyal to its name, and be somewhat reluctant to let go of their brand name, whatever the basis for that conviction. How did you overcome resistance, if there was any, Wendy, as to bringing people into the fold, so to speak?
Well, first of all, we sometimes talk about the fact that we often drink our own Kool-Aid. Mm-hmm. So we have this idea about who we are as an organization and what we should or shouldn't do. So again, we did measure that. We looked at that when we did some of our research. Should we keep our current name even as a corporate name? But we also did that with some of the brands that we were acquiring as well. And, I think one thing to keep in mind is that go through this exercise, you have to continue to do the research externally to help you formulate those decisions. from a corporate perspective, we decided to keep our corporate name, but we did have to make a lot of transitions with some of our other brands that weren't quite in alignment, and also didn't have very strong brand awareness and brand equity out in the marketplace.
And internally, I assume that you put into place some values that people could actually relate to that were unifying for the whole organization.
We did. We did a lot of work internally. It all stemmed from the original work that we did on the brand strategy. So I think one of the things that, again, that we learned from this experience was that by creating a core set of core values for the organization, we also created an employee value proposition around the brand. What happened was that all of the companies that were part of the organization all became integrated and united as a part of this branding process. And that is probably one of the key things that needs to happen in an organization. It really was our core. It provided the branding provided a platform for us for all of the work that we did internal with the team members. And it was also a platform for our engagement. Every year we do an engagement survey with our team members, and we saw incredible amount of collaboration and engagement around the brand, which continues and has just sort of created its own sort of organic growth as a result of this.
Well, that's great to hear, Wendy. So the brand has helped to break down silos and unify people around this common concept of what AMN Healthcare is and where it's going. That's a wonderful thing to hear. You know, one thing, Wendy, that we sometimes hear too is that, well, a branding exercise is just fix it and it's done. Sort of a one-off exercise. Now, we both know that's not the case, but how is the role of brand spread across the organization beyond your responsibilities in marketing? Has it become company-wide in terms of its impact? It's
part of who we are as an organization now. So, you know, I think people will say, well, marketing owns the brand, and maybe they own the exercise of going through and doing the branding, and I sometimes say that you know, we may become the marketing team may start this process. We tend to be the champions. We help as far as the change agents. We sometimes become the brand police. You've got folks out there that are tinkering with the brand. But at the end of the day, the entire organization owns the brand. And as I mentioned earlier, what is so unique is when you can go through this exercise and see how the organization, the internal organization, the team members embrace the brand. So it's owned by everyone. It's owned by your sales, it's owned by operations, it's owned by your HR department, and it's owned by your executives. We're fortunate enough to have the best brand evangelist, which is our CEO, Susan Solka, who is absolutely, when you watch her speak, she is the brand, and you can see her as she goes out and is the brand ambassador every time that she speaks, and so are many of our team members as they go out, and our leaders, that they have a very, very, very strong sense of our brand and are very good at articulating and communicating our messaging and positioning as an organization.
That's fantastic to hear that the CEO is actually using the brand as a platform to get her message across about the organization. Could you give me any examples, Wendy, of how she's doing that?
She does it through all of her presentations. She does it often when she's speaking to particular groups in the community about leadership, and talks a lot about the brand and who we stand for. She does it she speaks in front of all of our investor organizations about the brand and the messaging. And everything that she does is she ties in internal communications, external communications, and every year when she does our company meeting, the messaging, the positioning, we don't like to talk all the visuals, but you'll see the visuals all over our organization. And everyone within the organization embraces that, particularly Susan.
That really is great to hear. It's good when a CEO actually is behind the brand and sees it as an instrument of the company message and the company's themes going forward as a business. You know, one of the things we hear from AMN Healthcare is this notion of Health Cares Workforce Innovator. What was the idea behind that line, Wendy?
As I mentioned earlier, we started off in the staffing business, transactional staffing business, which is a very commoditized business. And it also just provides a very quick fix. And as we talked about who we want to be in the future and who we need to be for our customers, we looked at all of those attributes as we always look at as an organization. And one of the things that came out very strongly was that we needed to be, well, number one, innovative in workforce solutions. And there really wasn't another company out there who was positioning themselves in that way. It was a differentiator for us. It was an important differentiator for us because we needed to pull ourselves away from our competitors and be seen as our clients, sort of change our perception of who we were to our client facilities. It's really taken on a life of its own. And, I like to say that when your customers or whoever that might be or your stakeholders start talking about you the way you talk about yourself, that's when you've really reached that point of them understanding who you are as an organization.
So it's a really key point of differentiation for you that you're beginning to use this line, Health Cares Workforce Innovator, and it's being fed back to you by customers and people you do business with. It is,
and we've been using this for the last 2 or 3 years, the messaging and the positioning, and the other part of that is we've made investments into repositioning our company and how we're going to go ahead and do that beyond just our messaging. So it's being utilized across all of our operations and our sales teams in the way that they're positioning the organization as well.
So I assume, Wendy, when you go to your conferences and industry events, other professionals in marketing are very interested in what you've achieved at AMN Healthcare. Do they talk to you about branding and what their frustrations are, and do they ask you how you handled it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just at a meeting several months ago. One of the gals from a very large brand was asking some questions about how we went through this branding exercise. I think the biggest challenge that I hear is marketing leaders have difficulties in quantifying the value of their brand and determining the best approach for aligning their brand strategy with their business strategy. And sometimes people feel as though it's not quantifiable. And in business, obviously, everything's quantifiable. So that's probably the first thing that I hear. I think the other is concern about gaining executive approvals and consensus for change. And, for all organizations, change is necessary. If you're going to grow your business and in your organization, you need to be thinking into the future and your vision for the future. So it's definitely making sure that you can gain that executive approval and consensus. We know that even in our project, you don't always get consensus with everyone involved. But one thing that's critical, and this is also what I try to provide is some advice, is make sure you have a key champion. Because that will be the person who will help make those final decisions. And, if you've got the brand leaders and the folks, you're doing a lot of education with your leaders, but you need to have a key champion. And typically that's going to be someone in a very high executive position. In our particular case, it was our CEO, Susan Salka.
Excellent to hear. You mentioned there, Wendy, quantifying the value of branding. How do you do that at AMN?
We do it in several ways. We do, we do look at, obviously, we look at revenue for all of our brands, but we do on a regular basis try to do a lot of market research as well. So, for example, every year now we do market research on our own corporate brand. We want to make sure that we're still relevant. We want to make sure that we're increasing our brand recognition. And some people will say, well, brand awareness isn't enough, but when you're going through a repositioning like we did, and we have over the last 3 years, it's extremely important for us. So we have a variety of factors that we look at for all of the brands. And I think there's one thing that is really critical is that as we go through this, we have to consistently keep the brand in the conversation. So when discussions are being made about particular brands, and we still do have a multi-brand strategy, even though we're much more organized under a brand architecture, we do look at all aspects of the brand when we're trying to make decisions about maintaining brand or how they're how they're actually performing overall, and we consider all aspects of the brand and not just the revenue, but that's part of it, obviously.
Wendy, we're coming to the end of our time. I've got two questions I'd like to put to you before we end the interview. You deal with a lot when you deal with branding at a large, complex organization like AMN Healthcare, and you get most things right, but sometimes things go wrong or the mistakes are made. Any important lessons that you'd like to pass on to people who may be listening about something you do differently in the future, or an issue to watch out for?
I think probably the most important thing is to make sure that you keep the brand discussion alive at all times. We spent 2 years going through the whole developing out our brand architecture and our whole brand strategy. And when we were finished with that, I think everybody took a little bit of a breather and said, what's next? And if I were to do things differently, or a lesson learned, that would be that we should have probably developed a brand council and created ongoing discussions along the way. I think we did an excellent job. Most people would say, when there's an acquisition, how are we going to integrate it? What's the brand going to look like? So we created an amazing discipline along the way. But it's important to keep that brand discussion going. And there was a recommendation at one point in time about developing a brand council to assist in doing that. So when there were decisions that were being made, new brands, what do you do with old brands? How do you manage the corporate brand? What's happening in the marketplace that makes this change or will make us have to change our brand strategy? That it would have been helpful. I think that we forget that the business strategy and our brand strategy is always going to be changing and adapting, and that this is truly an evolution. It doesn't start and stop. And so having that continuous discussion about how to manage our brands moving forward into the future is a critical discussion, and something I think that you need to do if you're going to go through this exercise.
Well, those are great insights, Wendy. So keep the discussion going, form a brand council, think of brand as an evolving organic entity and not just a one-off, get executive approval, aligning the brand with business strategy. Some wonderful insights there, Wendy. Any last thought you'd like to pass on to people before we finish?
I'd just like to say also, as I mentioned before, that this is when you go through this type of program, it's very involved and it's a huge commitment from the organization. And if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you do have strong commitment, financial commitment, time commitment, and that you do look for and ensure that you have a trusted partner to work with you side by side. It's a lot of work, but I think that when you look at the entire project and what you're doing for the company and the value that the brand provides to the organization and again, for your business, you need to make sure that you've got all the commitment across the board and a trusted partner that can work with you at all times, side by side.
Well, Wendy, it's been a privilege to work with you on the program, and we are out of time, so thank you so much for participating today. It's been a truly fascinating conversation.
Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate your time.
That was Wendy Newman of AMN Healthcare, and this is Branding Business.